stand next to your light, but it's always night without you.
Good morning. Welcome to the Parenting Versus podcast. That intro music was a little bit different from today. That same artist. There's a little bit of echo in here, isn't there?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, same artist. My good friend Jeff Omidron, who lives here in Southern California, in the OC. And we thought it would be good to kind of change up the music because we are in Palm Springs, California. And we are going to visit Lindsey's grandparents who live here in Palm Springs. So, we thought, nice little guitar intro from my friend Jeff. And by the way, if you like that music, check out Jeff's SoundCloud. His name is Jeff Omidvaran. It's exactly how it spelled exactly how it sounds. Omidvaran. But yeah, really pretty song. I like that song. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and speaking of creative people again, yesterday we plugged Ryan. Go check out his book, because he is also. We're visiting his grandparents today too, so I just thought I would plug
we
this thing.
Have the same grandparents.
So ryanpfreeman.com. ryanpfreeman.com. Check out his books. But yeah, we're visiting your grandparents today.
I feel like that music kind of fits the tone of the weather outside. It's warm, but it's overcast and it's actually sprinkling a little bit. We were drinking our coffee outside and we came inside because it started to rain a little bit heavier. But yeah, we're gonna go visit my grandparents today.
Sprinkling in the desert.
Yeah, it's kind of nice though. It's refreshing.
It's humid outside.
I like it.
It's not a cold monsoon rain that we're used to in Albuquerque, but it's definitely refreshing.
Yeah, oh for sure, especially when it's like 107 degrees during the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been an interesting trip so far. We figured we should say hi to my grandparents since we're in the neighborhood. My grandma has not been doing super well. She's been sick. So she doesn't get to travel as much as she would like to, and
she's
so,
kind of weak, right?
Yeah,
how old is she?
She can't travel. She's 80 something. I think she's like 81. But yeah, she can't travel and visit us so much anymore. They used to come in their motorhome, but now that she's kind of stuck at home due to some health stuff, we're gonna go visit them. But it's always nice. It's always nice to see my grandparents, and I wish I could see them more. But we'll just enjoy the time while we have it, and that's good. They're my dad's parents, so.
The Freemans.
The Freemans. It's my maiden name.
Yep. So, your grandparents grew up in Eugene?
Yes. Well, my grandpa grew up in Eugene. Interesting story with my grandparents, and I can kind of. This episode is kind of about grandparents, so we just thought it would be nice to sort of have a thoughtful grandparent bonus episode today. Because we were talking about all the stories this morning that our grandparents tell us and the things that we treasure about the grandparents that we have and the grandparents that aren't with us anymore. So, but yeah, my grandpa Freeman grew up in Eugene, Oregon, where U of O is.
Go Ducks.
Go Ducks. Yeah, and he has an interesting story, actually. His biological father passed away when he was very, very young. He got really, really sick. And he passed away. His name was John Freeman. And his best friend promised that if anything ever happened to him, that he would take care of my great-grandmother and their family. And this was during the Depression. So my great-grandfather, my grandpa's dad, biological dad, passed away. And my great-grandmother married his best friend. And they didn't really, it's kind of weird.
That's like what you do back
then. They didn't really I don't really think that they liked each other all that much, but it was him fulfilling a promise, and economically, at the time, it also made a lot of sense. So.
Did he die in the war or something?
No, he got very sick. I think it was some kind of fever type thing. I'm not sure exactly. I would have to ask my grandpa.
That was
but-
part of the culture, I think. Like, if your best friend died, you took care of his family.
Right.
If you weren't married, I guess.
Yeah, and that's
Right.
exactly what happened. I mean, he married my great-grandmother. They had a couple of kids already, and then they had my grandpa's younger brother. So my great-grandmother and my great-grandfather's best friend, after they got married, they had one more child, and that was my grandpa's younger brother. But yeah, and they ran a boarding house. So the house in Eugene was a bigger house. My great-grandmother couldn't afford to support it by herself. They got married, and they ran it as a boarding house. So there were people in and out of their house all the time, renting rooms. And
This is kind of a silly question. What's a boarding house?
it would be kind of like a hostel or an Airbnb, I guess.
So people passing through can stay there.
Yeah, but it's just like a home rather than, a hotel. So they would rent a room.
Like an Airbnb of the...
It's like an Airbnb of the 30s.
Depression.
Yeah, basically. No, I mean, because think about it, like, people didn't have a lot of expendable income, and there wasn't a lot of extra money. So sometimes people would rent a room there, and they would say, I can pay my rent at this time. It was a lot of, from my understanding, they made a lot of kind of agreements that were based on, like, what the tenant could do. So, like, they would agree, like, I can pay you once every 2 weeks. Can I stay here? And then the boarding house owner would say, yes, that's fine. And they would provide things like meals, or they would eat as a family or a group.
That's neat.
If you watch Forrest Gump, the movie, at the beginning,
She had a boarding house?
She had a boarding house. When Elvis comes and stays with them, and he's passing through, same idea.
I wonder if they entertained any celebrities.
I doubt it.
In Eugene.
I doubt it.
So that was your dad's. He was a little person.
My grandpa, yeah.
Your grandpa was a little guy probably when this was happening.
His job, and he always talks about this, his job was to go down to the basement in the morning and stoke the fire before school. So he had to bring lumber down into the basement and put it in the wood stove to keep the house warm. That was his job, and then he had to do it again at night. So that was his responsibility.
Wow.
So as a kid, before school, he'd go and he'd put wood in the basement, and then again at night he'd go do the same thing. I think they had chickens too. I remember him telling me something about chickens. But yeah, I mean, they lived in Eugene. My dad was born in Eugene. And then, like, my dad, they moved from Eugene to Lake Oswego when my dad was pretty young. So
So your dad kind of grew up in Eugene too then?
a little bit, yeah. When he was really young, he did. And then they moved to Lake Oswego, I think.
For a job change or opportunity or something?
Well, my grandpa owned his own business. Eventually, he had a warehouse in Portland, and my grandpa grew up very, very poor.
Depression.
Yeah, well, he talks about this. He grew up very, very poor. He remembers having holes in his shoes and wearing shoes that were his older brother's that were too big, because they couldn't afford shoes. And he remembers working really, really hard. And my grandpa is very much a self-made man.
I was just going to say that he's a self-made man.
Yeah, he's
not college educated, right?
No, he never did college. He did do the military. He did the Navy for a little bit. But he worked very, very, very hard. He worked in a warehouse, and eventually he was the manager and the owner of the warehouse. And they did a lot of shipping for different things. My dad remembers...
Like convenience stores?
Yeah.
Like little 7-Elevens or what were the things out there that we saw all the time?
AMPMs?
AMPMs.
And 7-Elevens. Plaid pantries.
Plaid pantry.
Yeah,
those are the ones.
My dad remembers, this is so funny because my dad and his brothers would go help in the warehouse in the summertime for work. I don't necessarily think maybe they were helping. It was like not optional. Like, my grandpa was like, hey, it's summer. You're going to get a job.
Right.
But my dad remembers that he and his brothers figured out how to drop a giant box of M&Ms, like an entire case of M&Ms, just right, so that one or two of the bags would bust open so they could eat them.
I can see how that would go wrong and drop one and then they all break and you're like, oh, my bad, Dad.
They figured out the
Sorry.
exact height that you would have to drop it at to have like one of the bags bust open so that they could eat the M&Ms inside, like the big M&M bags.
That probably just thrilled your grandpa, I'm sure.
I'm sure he didn't know. He probably thought it was an accident, and just a very convenient accident all the time. So that's really funny because that's kind of the deal. And now they're retired here and they live in Palm Springs, and yeah, so we're gonna go visit them, and it's gonna be nice.
And your grandma, she grew up in a different town?
Yeah,
Did they meet in Eugene, I guess?
They did. So my grandparents are very interesting, and I've gotten bits and pieces of the story kind of as the years have gone. I have to pry a little sometimes. My grandma and grandpa are not very...
They keep to themselves.
They're very, I don't want to say shut off, but you really have to ask the right questions.
You have to be a good journalist.
Yeah, they're not going to offer information
right.
Just willingly. My grandma grew up in Kansas. I'm not exactly sure why she moved, but they moved away from Kansas when she was in high school. She met my grandpa at a dance in high school in Eugene. My grandpa tells me, he's told me this a few times, like, he knew that was the woman for him. Like, he saw her and he was like, it's over. And I guess she kind of brushed him off at first, but he finally, he took her out a few times, and they ended up getting married when they were 17. And then my grandpa got stationed in Washington, I believe, is where they sent him first for the...
Washington State.
Mm-hmm. And then in San Diego, and they went a couple different places, but they got married in high school. Like,
yeah. I remember him talking something about being in downtown Los Angeles, too.
Yeah, he was stationed a couple different places up and down the West Coast. But, it's interesting because their wedding picture, they're kids. I mean, they're 17 years old.
Wow.
And they're still together. And he loves her so much. It's incredible. I can't imagine marrying somebody at 17 and being with them,
yeah,
now, or even in my 80s. Like,
right.
But yeah, they've been together for a long time. They love each other. I don't know.
Yeah.
They have a connection. There's something there because,
right.
They were high school sweethearts. She was the new girl, like her senior year of high school. And
she was the new girl as a senior? Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's kind of like your story a little bit.
A little bit.
Except you were a junior.
I was a junior, yeah.
Coming to Albuquerque.
Yeah.
Meet this handsome man.
Yeah, that's exactly how it happened. I didn't meet you in high school.
I know, but
yes, I fell in love with a tall, dark, and handsome New Mexican. But yeah, my grandma grew up in Kansas, and then she moved to Eugene in high school, and then she married my grandpa, and life has been their life ever since. So they got married really young.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, and we're going to probably learn some new things today as we talk to them, I guess.
I hope I can ask the right questions.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. All right.
Always a mystery.
How about Nana?
My Nana?
Yeah.
What about my Nana?
Nana? What do you know about her? On this, your mom's mom.
My mom's mom. My Nana. My Nana has an interesting
backstory. Oh, I had one more
too.
Question
Yeah.
About your grandparents.
Yeah.
I was wondering, did they grow up Presbyterian, or?
I honestly have no idea.
Like, did they grow up in some sort of faith?
That is the big mystery, actually. We just saw my cousin a few days ago in Phoenix, my cousin Jenny, and she is my cousin on my dad's side, so my grandma and grandpa are also her grandma and grandpa. And we were talking about that. We don't know. My grandma and grandpa Freeman have always been very resistant towards religion. However...
They don't subscribe to any sort of faith right now, do they?
No. And I'm not sure that they're atheist or agnostic, or I honestly don't know.
It's one of those things they just don't talk about.
They do not talk about it. I have a sneaking suspicion that something may have happened in the church when they were younger, when my grandma was younger especially. I have no idea what it is, but I do know that when I was about 9 years old, my grandma and I were looking through some family photo albums, and she was telling me about different things, because I've always been the weird grandchild that likes to look at photo albums and I want to know the history, even at 9 years old. I was like, tell me the history of our family, and my grandma was probably like, don't you just want to play outside? But I remember finding a couple of little paper things that were kind of like Sunday school projects that you would do. If you're a child, you would do a picture in Sunday school, and it would have a Bible verse.
Right.
And I remember finding one, and it had my grandma's name on it. And it said Joyce, that's her name, and it was written in little kid handwriting. So she was obviously a child when she made this. And it said something like, God takes care of the birds and bees. How much more will He take care of me? And it was a little picture of some animals, and it was a little drawing, and then she had colored it, and I thought it was interesting for two reasons. One, it was obviously made when she was really young, and two, she kept it. So I don't know. I don't know. Something happened with my grandma. I think she was raised religiously, but she does not talk about it. It's not an open discussion. I've seen little hints of that throughout knowing my grandma. My dad was a pastor for a while, and we were in church one time. I think it was like Thanksgiving or Christmas. It was a holiday, and my grandparents were visiting. And my grandma and grandpa went, and I think they were going just out of duty because it was a holiday and they were trying to be supportive of my dad. It had nothing to do with them, like, wanting to go to church, I don't think. But we were singing a song, and it was an older song. It was like a hymn, and my grandma made a comment, and she said, "I know this song. I remember it." And I remember thinking, whoa, like, you know this song and you remember it. So you remember it from when? And you know it, which tells me that she probably has had some kind of a church something growing up. Typically you wouldn't know or remember a song you've only heard once or twice. So it tells me that maybe she had some kind of upbringing and some kind of faith as a child, and something went terribly wrong. I don't know. It's a conversation I would like to have with them, but they're very closed off about it. And so it's just finding
If
the
you
right
brought it
way.
up, they would just very quickly and politely change the subject.
They would dismiss it.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Keep talking. I'm going to grab some coffee.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and then my Nana, my mom's mom, lives in Albuquerque now. She's from Portland. Well, she grew up in Bend, Oregon. She grew up in Bend, Oregon. And then she got a job with a telephone company in Portland. After she graduated high school, she moved to Portland and met my grandpa, and they got divorced when my mom was like 6. They had my uncle and my mom, and then she remarried and had my aunt, Chrissy. And now my Nana lives in Albuquerque, and my Nana is also probably one of my best friends, which makes me a super nerd, but I don't care. We're a lot alike, so I feel like my Nana kind of gets me, and I kind of get her, and we're cool. My Nana's mom, my great-grandma, lived to be 101, which is pretty incredible. She was sharp as a tack, and she was totally with it until the day she died, like mentally. It was so crazy because her body was like getting older, but her mind was still just like there.
And she met the president twice.
Yeah, she did. She met Reagan twice.
Reagan and Carter.
Oh, Carter, yeah.
Yeah, but it's kind of funny because your parents only put the picture of Reagan up in their house.
I know.
Because they're Republicans.
Yeah. My great grandma, my grandma Walter, I used to call her Cookie Grandma.
Why?
I started calling her that when I was really little.
She gave you a cookie?
Maybe. She was always Cookie Grandma. So I'm not sure why it probably started when I was real little.
Yeah.
But she always had great stories, and she told me one time she was walking to church when she was a child, and she
Catholic?
had I think so.
Because she almost became a nun.
Yeah. And so she was walking, this is before cars. She was born in 1897.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. She was born in 1897, and she died in 1998. So, so she was walking to church with her family. She said her mother used to braid her hair really tight, and it hurt really bad. And
did she wear a bonnet?
I have no idea.
She might have.
But she said they had special shoes that they only wore to church. Like, they wore them once a week, and they were the kind of shoes that you had like the little metal things to do with the buttons. They like went up to your ankles, and they had like buttons. And she said one day she was walking to church with her family, and her hair was in a braid, and it was really tight, and she stopped to try to like loosen it, and she stepped right in a mud puddle, and her mom like got so mad at her because she got her church boots dirty in a mud puddle. Like,
wow.
Like she got in deep trouble, and she remembers this. It's so funny because she told me the story, and I was
Your Cookie Grandma?
Yeah.
Was that in Oregon?
I think if I remember, I think she grew up in Idaho, and then they moved to Oregon later on.
Nampa, Idaho?
No, I don't think it was Nampa.
Boise?
I think it was Caldwell. actually. But yeah, so funny story. So she grew up very Catholic, my great grandma.
Mm-hmm.
She was going to become a nun. This is hilarious because it kind of just reminds me of like The Sound of Music, minus the singing. She was going to become a nun. She answered an ad in Portland to help this family. It was a single father. He had like 3 or 4 children at the time, 3 or 4 young children at the time. All the wives, he had literally been married 2 or 3 times. They had all died in childbirth, like every single time. Mm-hmm. So he had all these very young children, and he needed help. And she was going to become a nun, but she needed a job and she needed some money. So she answered this ad, and they eventually fell in love, got married, and my grandma was the result of that. And it's just crazy because literally my great grandfather had been married. Like, he married one woman who they had 1 child. She died in childbirth. He married her sister. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's back in the day, so that's what they did. He married her sister. She died in childbirth. Mm-hmm. So there was 2 kids. Then he married another lady. Again, she died in childbirth. Like, that's crazy to me.
And then the 4th was my great grandma.
Mm-hmm.
Nana was a result.
Yeah.
Helen
Meyer. Helen Walter. But yeah, so it was crazy because she had an older sister, well, half sister.
That was in Portland?
Yes.
And then she moved to Bend later on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But your grandma, your Nana, she grew up in Portland.
No, my Nana grew up in Bend.
Your Nana grew up in Bend? Mm-hmm. And then, so she grew up in Bend, went to Portland, and then went back, I guess? Because your mom grew up in Portland.
Yes.
Okay.
No, my great-grandmother and great-grandfather lived in Portland for a while and then moved to Bend.
Okay.
My Nana was born in Bend.
Okay.
She grew up in Bend. She moved to Portland when she was out of high school.
Ah, and that's where she met your grandpa?
Yes.
Richard?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he passed away a couple years ago. But yeah, so, yeah. So it was interesting, because, you know, my Nana's oldest half-sibling was like 14 years older than her.
Wow.
Yeah. And then she had a brother, Archie, who died when she was 6, and he was in World War II. And he drove over a landmine in
Mm-hmm.
Sicily, and the car blew up. Mm-hmm. But she it's so funny because she'll tell me about him. She remembers him. He used to carry her on his shoulders.
Because he was older.
He was older. And so she was a little kid. He used to put her on his shoulders and carry her around.
Yeah. Yeah, your mom was showing me your grandma's baby book.
Yeah.
With the picture. It has a lock of her hair.
I know. That's so crazy.
It's really neat.
It's cool. It's cool.
So, and then Uncle Dan, that was your grandma's brother?
Yep.
He passed away?
He passed away.
I got to meet him.
Yeah, he's a super kind guy.
Really nice, yeah.
Huge dude.
Yeah, he was a big dude.
Yeah, tall, very tall, really blue eyes.
Yeah, his hearing was a little bit off.
Yeah.
And he thought my name was Carlos. Yeah. So I just rolled with it. My name's Lorenzo, and
yeah.
He said, hey, he was very, very nice. I remember that.
Nicest guy. Dan and Elaine.
Yeah, he called me Carlos. That's okay, though.
No, that's all right.
And they lived in Portland?
They did, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my Uncle Dan was always super kind.
Yeah. Does your grandma have any living brothers or sisters?
At this point, no, I don't think she does.
Really?
My Aunt Margaret passed away 2 years ago, her sister.
Oh.
And that was one of the older sisters. So, yeah, she's the only one left, and I think, I don't know, I can't imagine that. Like, that's really hard for me to think about.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
But she's got family. She's with us. She's got
She's
family.
in Albuquerque.
Yeah,
right?
My Nana's in Albuquerque.
She has 2 dogs.
Yeah, she's 2 annoying, yippy.
Bella and
Murphy.
Murphy. I love Murphy.
Bella has like gangle teeth.
Yeah. And
she's the ugliest, dumbest dog, but my grandma
Don't tell your grandma
her.
that. Yeah, your grandma loves her.
Well, God bless her. I mean.
And then Murphy's just along for the ride, I think. So, but yeah, I love your Nana. She's your best friend. You always say that.
She totally is. Her and my brother. I'm just kind of weird, I guess. I don't know. I'm like, yeah, my best friend's like an 80-year-old woman.
And she loves Juliet.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I just think it's really cool. Like, women in my family tend to live a very long time. Mm-hmm. I think it's so cool that my grandma has gotten to see her great-grandchildren.
Yeah.
Like, not a lot of people get to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and like my great-grandma, I had a relationship with her.
You have memories with
until
Cookie Grandma.
she passed away. I was like 14 when she passed away. So we had like 14 solid years of a relationship, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember the day she passed away. Actually, I was in PE in school, and they pulled me out of PE class. We were running laps, and I remember thinking, like, am I in trouble? Like, what? Like, why? Like, this never happens to me. And then they told me, and then they were like, your mom is coming to pick you up. You have to go, because we had to drive down to wherever my great grandma had passed away or something. I can't remember. She was in a hospice house, and it was run by nuns.
Nice.
They were Eastern European. I don't think they were Russian. I don't remember what they were, but we would go visit her kind of towards the end, and there were these nuns that were there, and they would take care of her, and they were very kind, but they were Eastern European, some kind of Orthodox nuns. Not sure why, but that's what she chose.
Yeah.
So
Neat. And then your grandpa, Richard,
yeah,
he was in the Navy, right?
he was.
Did he? And he grew up in Portland?
He did. So my grandpa, my Nana's first husband, they were divorced after a while, but my mom's dad, he was adopted when he was a baby. And he did not find out that he was adopted until he was 30 years old. And that was when his mother passed away, and he was going through some papers in their house trying to sort out the estate and things. And he found the adoption papers. And he found out that he was adopted. Nobody told him. He found out on his own when he was 30. So I think that was a big turning point in his life. Like, I think he was really hurt by that. My grandpa, a lot of his life, he was an alcoholic. And I think that it probably really escalated around that time.
Right.
But yeah, he was adopted from Astoria, Oregon.
That's on the coast,
It's
right?
on the coast,
like,
yeah.
It's like almost in Washington.
Yeah, it's on the coast.
Right. That's where the Columbia goes into the ocean.
And they have a really big influx of Finnish immigrants. And back from like the turn of the century up until like 1948, Finnish immigrants would come to Astoria, and they would seasonally fish the ocean because it's really rough waters.
And they had that skill.
They had that skill. So they would kind of contract out the fishing to these immigrants. So yeah, even if you look today, there's like a huge Finnish population there. They have a Finnish like city hall up there. Like it's crazy. So apparently my grandfather was the result of a Finnish immigrant and a sailor having some fun one night. And he was adopted though. So he never knew his biological parents. He was adopted as an infant, like I said, in Portland. And he was adopted by a pretty wealthy family in Portland. My grandma Cobb, her maiden name was Reed. But my great-grandma and great-grandpa, his adopted parents, were kind of like Portland old money. So they were pretty well known in Portland, and they had a lot of philanthropic things they did. And my great-grandmother was on the board for a lot of different children's organizations and charities and things. My great-grandfather owned a lumber finishing business, so they would, he owned it in Portland, and then they had another one up in Canada. And what they would do is they would do some kind of finishing on the wood in the logging industry.
The Finns would do the finishing?
No, this is my great-grandpa.
Oh, okay.
My grandpa's adopted parents. They would do, it was like a kiln process, so they would do wood finishing and stuff like that. So they had quite a bit of money. One of the houses in a historical area in Portland, actually we got to go see it when we were up there last time, was built by my great-grandfather for my great-grandmother, and that's the house my grandpa grew up in. And it's on the historic register in Portland because it's one of the oldest houses in Portland Heights.
Is that the one that we saw?
And it was for sale when we went to go see it.
It was for sale. Super nice property. This home was immaculate.
Yeah, it's crazy because when he built it, I've seen pictures from my grandpa's childhood, and there was like nothing around it.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like this view of the city and then trees and then this house.
Is that considered the West Hills? Mm-hmm. Did you just say that?
Portland Heights, West Hills.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's yeah. But it's on the historical register, and I actually found the blueprints to it in the Historical Society because it's part of that. So it was interesting because his name was J. Forrest Cobb, and he built that, and my great grandmother got to meet two presidents because of her work with children. She used to go to the hospital, and she would hold crack babies, and she would hold babies that were drug babies, and they had a program where you could go hold them because they needed the human contact for bonding. So she would go do that.
And they just couldn't stop crying.
Yeah,
Because they were addicted.
Right, they were going through withdrawal. So my great grandma would go and she would hold them. She had a really good heart.
Yeah.
She was just a wonderful lady. And I remember her. She died when I was a little bit younger, but I do have a few memories of my grandma Cobb.
And she was your grandpa's mom?
Adopted mom, yeah. So, yeah.
Good.
Crazy, huh?
So, yeah.
Life is weird.
What kind of impact have your grandparents had on you collectively?
I don't know. I mean, that's a big question. You know, my grandpa, my mom's dad, my grandpa Cobb, that we were just talking about, he used to take me to OMSI, the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry.
Super cool.
Yeah, he always invested knowledge in me. He would always nurture my brain. He would take me to go do things that had to do with science and astronomy and robotics. Like, my grandpa was just, he's nerdy.
Fascinated with a lot of stuff.
He loved maps. He had a lot of interests, and he would share that knowledge with me. And so, like, I remember he bought me a telescope one year for Christmas. Not a telescope, I'm sorry.
Microscope.
Microscope. Yeah. And he was like, you know, you can put anything under here and see what it looks like. And he showed me how to do the slides, and he taught me how to do it. And then we would sit there and he would show me how to manipulate the lens to be able to see things.
Right.
And that was super cool. He bought me encyclopedias, kids' encyclopedias, and maps and books, and he would take me to go do science-y things. And that was like, he enjoyed it as much as I did.
I'm sure.
It was great.
Yeah.
I love my grandpa. And then my Nana, she's just funny. The thing I love about my Nana is she's always been very honest with me and very, like, her sense of humor is very blunt. And she and I have, I don't know, we have the same personality. Like,
Yeah.
like, she is no nonsense. She does not mess around. She is no BS. And if you don't like it, too bad for you. Handle it.
And she doesn't like to be uncomfortable either.
Yeah.
She won't walk around the plaza if she doesn't have to.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's the same thing as you. Like I'm not going to go on a hike in the desert. What would I do that for?
That sounds terrible.
That's like your Nana coming through, I think.
A little bit, yeah. My Nana really has to be, like, game for something, and if she's not, she's going to tell you, like, no, that's stupid. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Yes, that is my Nana.
Yeah.
And then my Grandma Freeman, she was always the manners and the domestic side of things. She taught me how to bake things. My Grandma Freeman is an amazing baker. She made the best strawberry rhubarb pies in the world. Period. I don't care if you think you've had the best pie. You haven't, because my grandma did not make it. So you go to my grandma's house and you'll know what pie.
Unless you've had a Joyce pie, then you know.
They had a garden. My grandma and Grandpa Freeman in Lake Oswego, they had this huge garden. My grandpa cleared out like an acre of blackberry bushes. Like, I think I told you, like, blackberries are really cool, but they're also really invasive. So there was this huge hillside in their yard of just blackberry bushes, and he cleared it all out, leveled it out, and made a garden above their house, a huge garden. Nice. And they planted fruit and vegetables and flowers, and so my grandma would go pick the berries and stuff, and she'd make pies out of them. And so she would teach me how to do stuff like that, and they would always let me have Fruit Loops at their house because my parents never bought sugar cereal. But yeah, my Grandma Freeman gave me an appreciation for history, I think, and family. And my Grandpa Freeman used to take me roller skating.
Yeah, that's what grandpas do.
And I used to tease him, and I used to try to trip him. But then he'd trip
Jeez.
me. No, but then he'd trip me back.
That's hardcore.
Well, he was pretty hardcore, too.
Yeah.
So he would trip me back, and he'd be like, don't open a can of worms that you can't finish.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, okay, Grandpa. And I remember one time when I was like 12, I don't know, there was like a news story about somebody getting kidnapped. And so he's like, do you know what happens if someone tries to grab you? And I was like, no. And he's like, you punch him in the face.
Jeez.
And he's like, he showed me how to punch somebody in the nose so that, like, you could break their nose. He's like, you punch them in the face and you run. And I was like, okay, Grandpa.
Nice. He's like giving you boxing lessons and stuff. That's awesome. Well,
I'm going to see Grandpa Freeman today.
so yeah, grandparents leave a legacy, right? They for sure do, especially on their grandkids.
I think
And
we should talk about your grandparents too on the next episode.
well, let's do it now because I don't want to split it up into two.
Oh, okay. I just gotta check the time because we were supposed to be there at 11.
Oh, yeah, it's 10:15. I guess this was about your grandparents then. We'll talk about mine some other time.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well,
Sorry to cut it short. We gotta go see my grandma and grandpa.
yeah, you guys have a good one. Maybe we'll do a parents episode too.
Yeah.
And we'll learn about my grandparents some other time.
All right.